The weathered sign barely clung to the rusted chain. "Do not approach." Colt Brennan stared at the structure beyond. His grandfather's cabin, now a tomb of tangled vines and moss, windows boarded shut, heavy padlock untouched since 1948. Something had made his grandfather seal this place away forever, and now, 75 years later, Colt was the only one left who might have the courage to find out why. 3 weeks had passed since he'd buried Silas Brennan, and still the old man's final words haunted him. "Promise me, boy, never open that cabin. Some doors are meant to stay closed." But standing here now, surrounded by the vast emptiness of the inherited ranch, Colt felt the weight of unanswered questions pressing down like the oppressive Texas sun. The main house held no answers, just faded photographs of a grandfather who'd grown more secretive with each passing year, and a will that specifically mentioned the cabin only to forbid its opening. The sound of gravel crunching behind him made Colt turn. A dust-covered pickup truck approached, and from it emerged a woman with dark hair tied back and intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She wore practical clothes and carried herself with the confidence of someone used to solving problems. "You must be Silas's grandson," she said, extending a hand. "I'm Mercy Whitfield. I run the historical society in town. Heard you inherited the place." Colt shook her hand, noticing how her gaze immediately shifted to the overgrown cabin behind him. Something flickered across her features. Recognition, maybe fear. "That's quite a sight," Mercy continued, but her voice had changed, becoming more careful. "Local folks have been wondering if you'd respect your grandfather's wishes about that place." "What do you know about it?" Colt asked, studying her reaction. Mercy glanced around nervously, as if making sure they were alone. "I know enough to tell you that some people in town won't be happy if you start asking questions about 1948. And I know that cabin isn't the only thing your grandfather kept locked away." She paused, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his pulse quicken. "The question is, are you brave enough to find out what he was really protecting?" Colt felt his jaw tighten at her challenge. The afternoon heat seemed to press closer as he studied Mercy's face, searching for answers in her expression. She knew something specific about this place, something that went beyond local gossip or historical curiosity. "What exactly are you trying to tell me?" he asked, his voice carrying the edge of a man who'd grown tired of riddles since inheriting this burden. Mercy glanced toward the cabin again, then back to him. "Your grandfather wasn't just a rancher, Colt. In 1948, he was involved in something that certain families in this county would prefer stayed buried. Some of those families still have influence, still have money, and they've been waiting to see what you do with this place." She pulled a manila envelope from her truck and handed it to him. Inside were photocopied newspaper clippings from 1948, yellowed and fragile-looking even in reproduction. The headlines made his stomach drop. "Local rancher accused of harboring fugitives," and "Brennan Ranch under federal investigation." The government was relocating Native American families from their traditional lands, Mercy continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Your grandfather helped some of them hide. The cabin was their safe house. When the authorities finally caught on, Silas sealed it up and swore he'd never speak of what happened there." Colt stared at the newspaper clippings, his grandfather's face staring back from a grainy photograph. The man in the picture looked younger, but carried the same stubborn set to his jaw that Colt recognized in himself. The article mentioned evidence destroyed and charges dropped due to lack of proof. "How do you know all this?" Colt demanded. "Because my grandmother was one of the families he saved," Mercy said quietly. "She told me the story before she died, made me promise to keep an eye on this place. She said there were documents hidden in that cabin, proof of what really happened, and proof of who helped the government track down the other families." A truck engine rumbled in the distance, growing closer. Mercy tensed immediately, her eyes scanning the horizon with the alertness of someone who'd learned to watch for danger. "That's probably Tom Hartwell," she said, stuffing the envelope back into her truck. "His family owned the land adjacent to this ranch back in '48. His grandfather was the one who tipped off the authorities about what Silas was doing." The approaching truck was a newer model, clean and expensive looking, carrying 2 men in the cab. It slowed as it passed the ranch entrance, and Colt could see the passenger pointing in their direction. "They've been watching this place since your grandfather died," Mercy said urgently. "If you're going to open that cabin, it has to be soon, and it has to be when they're not expecting it." The truck made a U-turn and headed back toward them, moving faster now. Mercy started her engine. But before she could leave, she leaned out the window with an expression that mixed hope and fear in equal measure. "Meet me at the old Miller's Crossing Bridge tonight at midnight. There's something else you need to see first. Something that will help you understand why this matters so much." As her truck disappeared down the dirt road, Colt watched the other vehicle approach. Whatever his grandfather had sealed away, some people would kill to keep it buried. The truck pulled up beside Colt with deliberate slowness, its chrome bumper gleaming in the harsh afternoon sun. Two men stepped out. The driver was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and the kind of expensive boots that had never seen real ranch work. The passenger looked younger and harder, his eyes scanning the property with the practiced assessment of someone evaluating a threat. "You must be Silas's boy," the older man said, extending a hand that Colt noticed was soft and uncalloused. "Tom Hartwell. My family's been neighbors to this ranch for 3 generations." Colt shook the offered hand briefly, immediately disliking the man's smile. It was the kind of expression that never reached the eyes, polished and empty as his boots. "I was sorry to hear about your grandfather's passing," Hartwell continued, but his gaze kept drifting toward the overgrown cabin. "Fine man. Knew when to leave well enough alone. I hope you'll show the same wisdom he did in his later years." "What exactly are you talking about?" Colt asked, though he suspected he already knew. The younger man stepped forward, and Colt noticed the slight bulge of a concealed weapon beneath his jacket. "Mr. Hartwell's just saying that some things are better left undisturbed. Your grandfather understood that. He lived peacefully here for decades by respecting certain boundaries. And if I don't respect those same boundaries?" Hartwell's smile tightened. "Well, that would be unfortunate. You see, there are investors interested in this land. Good people with deep pockets who'd pay handsomely for a ranch with no complications, no messy historical issues that might require expensive legal proceedings." The threat was delivered with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather, but Colt felt the weight behind it. These men weren't just concerned about old family secrets. They were worried about something that could cost them money, reputation, or worse. "My grandfather left me this land," Colt said carefully. "I plan to honor his memory by taking care of it properly." "Taking care of it," Hartwell repeated, his voice hardening slightly. "That's exactly what we're hoping for. Taking care means not disturbing things that should stay buried. It means not entertaining visitors who might fill your head with romantic notions about the past." They knew about Mercy's visit. They'd probably been watching the ranch constantly since Silas died, waiting to see what the new owner would do. The realization sent a chill down Colt's spine despite the heat. "I appreciate the neighborly advice," Colt said, his voice steady despite the tension coiling in his chest. "But I think I can manage my own property." The younger man took another step closer. "See, that's where you might be wrong. This isn't just about your property anymore. Some secrets affect entire communities, entire families. People have built their lives assuming certain things would stay buried." Hartwell placed a restraining hand on his companion's arm, but his eyes remained fixed on Colt. "Think carefully about your next moves. Son, your grandfather was smart enough to know that some doors should never be opened. I'd hate to see you make a mistake that you can't take back." As they climbed back into their truck, Hartwell rolled down his window for one final comment. "We'll be keeping an eye on things around here. For everyone's safety, of course." The truck drove away. Whatever lay hidden in that cabin was worth killing for. Midnight found Colt driving through the darkness toward Miller's Crossing, his headlights cutting through the thick Texas air. The old bridge stretched across a dry creek bed, its concrete cracked and weathered from decades of neglect. Mercy's truck was already there, parked in the shadows beneath the bridge supports. She emerged from the darkness carrying a heavy duffel bag, her movements quick and nervous. The moonlight caught her face, revealing the strain of someone who had been carrying secrets for too long. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said, setting the bag down between them. "After this afternoon's visit from Hartwell, I'm starting to think I don't have much choice," Colt replied. "What's in the bag?" Mercy unzipped it to reveal stacks of documents, photographs, and what looked like official government correspondence. "My grandmother saved everything. Every letter, every photograph, every piece of evidence from 1948. She knew someday someone would need proof of what really happened." She pulled out a manila folder and handed it to him. Inside were photographs that made Colt's blood run cold. Black and white images showing federal agents loading Native American families onto government trucks, children crying as they were separated from their parents. And in the background of several photos, a much younger Silas Brennan watching with obvious distress. Your grandfather didn't just help families hide, Mercy continued, her voice barely above a whisper. He documented everything. He photographed the forced relocations, recorded the names of families who disappeared, kept copies of the government orders that were supposed to be classified. Colt studied a photograph showing his grandfather standing next to a man in a federal uniform. The agent's face was clear, and something about his features looked familiar. That's Marshal Theodore Hartwell, Mercy said, noticing his focus. Tom's grandfather. He was the federal agent in charge of the relocation operation. Your grandfather trusted him initially, even helped him identify families who were hiding. But when Silas realized what was really happening to those people, he tried to stop cooperating. What do you mean? What was really happening? Mercy pulled out another folder, this one containing official documents stamped with government seals. The families weren't being relocated to reservations like they were told. They were being taken to work camps, forced labor operations disguised as agricultural programs. Many of them never came home. The weight of the revelation hit Colt like a physical blow. His grandfather hadn't just been helping people hide from the government. He'd been trying to save them from what amounted to slavery. Silas started keeping records when he realized Marshal Hartwell was lying to him, Mercy continued. He documented the real destinations, photographed the work camps, even recorded conversations with federal officials. When Hartwell found out, he threatened to have Silas arrested for treason unless he destroyed everything and kept quiet. But he didn't destroy it. He hid it all in the cabin, then sealed the place shut. He figured if he was dead and gone, the truth couldn't hurt anyone anymore. But he was wrong. The Hartwell family has been building their wealth and influence on the foundation of that cover-up for 75 years. A car engine sounded in the distance, growing closer. Mercy immediately began stuffing the documents back into the bag. They followed you, she said urgently. We have to go. Now. As headlights appeared on the horizon, Colt realized opening his grandfather's cabin would mean bringing down one of the most powerful families in the county. They split up at the bridge, Mercy heading south while Colt took the long route back to the ranch. His rearview mirror showed headlights following at a distance, maintaining just enough space to avoid being obvious. The realization that he was now under constant surveillance sent adrenaline coursing through his veins. By the time he reached the ranch house, Colt had made his decision. Whatever the consequences, whatever the risks, he was going to open that cabin. His grandfather had sealed away the truth for 75 years, but the people responsible for those atrocities were still profiting from their crimes. The next morning brought oppressive heat and the sound of vehicles approaching. Colt watched from his kitchen window as 3 trucks pulled up to his property line. Men got out and began setting up what looked like a surveillance post, complete with folding chairs and coolers. They weren't hiding their presence anymore. Colt spent the day gathering tools from the barn, bolt cutters for the chain, a crowbar for the padlock, and a flashlight powerful enough to illuminate whatever darkness waited inside. He also found his grandfather's old toolbox, thinking the man who had sealed the cabin might have left clues about how to open it properly. As afternoon faded to evening, the watchers maintained their positions. Colt counted at least 6 men now, taking shifts and communicating through radio handsets. They had turned his property into a military operation, and he was the enemy target. When darkness finally fell, Colt made his move. He slipped out the back of the house and worked his way through the scrub brush toward the cabin, moving carefully to avoid the sight lines from the road. The overgrown vegetation that had seemed so ominous before now provided perfect cover. The chain came off easily with the bolt cutters, but the padlock proved more challenging. It was old but well made, and the years had actually strengthened the metal rather than weakening it. After 20 minutes of careful work with the crowbar, he finally heard the satisfying click of the mechanism giving way. The cabin door swung open with a groan that seemed unnaturally loud in the still night air. Colt held his breath, listening for any sign that the watchers had heard, but the distant murmur of their voices continued unchanged. He stepped inside and immediately felt the weight of history pressing down on him. The air was stale and thick, carrying the scent of old wood and something else. Fear, maybe, or desperation. His flashlight beam revealed a single room that had been preserved exactly as it was left in 1948. Against the far wall stood a large wooden desk covered with neat stacks of documents. Metal filing cabinets lined one side of the room, their contents waiting to be discovered. But what drew Colt's attention immediately was the wall covered with photographs. Dozens of images showing faces of Native American families, federal agents, and scenes that could only be described as evidence of systematic oppression. As he moved deeper into the cabin, his flashlight illuminated something that made his blood freeze. In the center of the room sat a tape recorder, obviously old but carefully maintained, with a handwritten note attached that read, "For my grandson, play this first." The sound of breaking glass from outside shattered the silence. They had found him. Colt grabbed the tape recorder and pressed play, his grandfather's voice filling the musty air with words that had waited decades to be heard. "If you're listening to this, boy, then I'm dead, and you've made the choice I never could. Good. It's time." Silas's voice sounded younger, stronger than Colt remembered. "What I'm about to tell you will put you in danger, but keeping quiet has been killing me for decades." The sound of footsteps crunching through the overgrown brush outside made Colt's pulse spike, but he couldn't stop listening. Marshal Theodore Hartwell came to me in 1948 with what seemed like a reasonable request: help identify Native families who were hiding from relocation orders. He promised they'd be treated fairly, moved to good land with proper supplies. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. More footsteps, closer now. Colt could hear voices whispering commands. He turned the volume down but kept the recorder playing. I gave him names, locations, told him where families were hiding. 12 families in total. But then I started hearing things. Families weren't ending up on reservations. They were disappearing entirely. So I followed one of the transport trucks. Silas's voice cracked with emotion that had been preserved for 3 generations. They weren't taking them to reservations, Colt. They were taking them to private ranches where they worked as unpaid labor. Slaves, essentially. And when they got sick or tried to escape, they just disappeared. The Hartwell family was getting paid by the government for each family relocated, then selling them to ranchers who needed cheap workers. A flashlight beam swept across the cabin's window. Colt ducked down but kept listening. I tried to get the surviving families out, but Hartwell caught on. He told me if I said anything, he'd have me arrested for treason. Said I'd be branded a communist sympathizer, and my family would lose everything. But I couldn't just forget what I'd seen. The tape recorder continued as Silas described the evidence he'd collected: photographs of the work camps, copies of financial records showing payments between the government and private ranchers, and most damning of all, a recording he'd made of Hartwell bragging about the operation to other federal agents. "All the evidence is hidden behind the false wall in this cabin. Press the 3rd board from the left near the window. It slides away. Inside you'll find everything you need to prove what they did." The cabin door rattled as someone tested the handle. Colt realized they hadn't just found him, they were preparing to come inside. One more thing. "Boy, Theodore Hartwell isn't the only one still alive who knows the truth. His son Tom was there for some of the operations when he was young. He knows exactly what his family built their fortune on, and he'll do anything to keep it secret." The door exploded inward as armed men flooded into the cabin, their flashlights blinding Colt as he clutched the recorder. Tom Hartwell's voice cut through the chaos. "Well, well. Looks like old Silas finally found someone foolish enough to open his little time capsule." Tom Hartwell stepped into the cabin with 3 armed men behind him, his expensive boots crunching on the debris that had accumulated over the decades. He looked older in the harsh light of the flashlights, his face drawn with the weight of protecting secrets that had shaped his entire life. "You know your grandfather was a smart man," Hartwell said, gesturing for his men to keep their weapons trained on Colt. He understood that some things are bigger than individual conscience. Too bad you don't share his wisdom. Colt clutched the tape recorder tighter, his grandfather's voice still echoing in his mind. "So it's all true then. Your family built everything on slave labor and murder. My family built everything on opportunity," Hartwell snapped. "The government needed a problem solved, and we solved it. Everyone except the families who died in your work camps." Hartwell's expression hardened. "That tape recorder won't do you any good. No one will believe accusations from a dead man. And without physical evidence, it's just the ramblings of a guilty conscience." But Colt was already moving. His grandfather had said the 3rd board from the left near the window, and he could see now that one section of the wall looked slightly different from the rest. As Hartwell continued talking, Colt shifted position, getting closer to the false panel. "The thing is, Colt, this doesn't have to end badly for you. You're young. You've got your whole life ahead of you. Take the money I offered, sell me this land, and walk away. Find somewhere else to start over. Like those families were supposed to start over in your work camps? Those families were breaking federal law," Hartwell insisted. but his authority was cracking. We were following orders. Colt pressed against the third board and felt it give slightly. Behind Hartwell's back, he worked the panel loose while maintaining eye contact with the older man. My grandfather's recording mentions financial records, photographs, even recordings of federal agents discussing the operation, all hidden right here in this cabin. Hartwell's composure cracked for the first time. Even if such evidence existed, who would you take it to? You're one man with an old conspiracy theory. The panel finally came free in Colt's hands, revealing a hollow space behind the wall stuffed with manila folders, metal file boxes, and what looked like another tape recorder. Hartwell saw his expression change and spun around just as Colt grabbed the nearest box. "Stop him!" Hartwell shouted. But Colt was already pulling documents from the box, photographs showing Native American families in chains, working in fields under armed guard, financial records detailing payments from the federal government to the Hartwell family, and most damning of all, a thick folder labeled disposal records that documented what happened to families who tried to escape. Hartwell pulled a pistol from his jacket. "Put it all back, Colt. Right now." Colt stared down the barrel of Hartwell's pistol, the weight of 75 years of injustice heavy in his hands. The photographs of chained families seemed to burn against his fingers, their faces demanding justice that had been denied for 3 generations. "You're going to put those documents back," Hartwell said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his gun hand. "Then you're going to walk out of here and forget this place ever existed. Like you made those families forget they ever existed?" Behind Hartwell, his men shifted nervously. These weren't federal agents or professional killers. They were local hired hands who probably hadn't signed up for murder. Colt could see doubt creeping into their faces as they processed what they'd heard. "Those people were breaking federal law," Hartwell insisted, but his authority was cracking. "We were following orders. Your own financial records show you were paid per family captured," Colt said, holding up a bank statement dated 1948. $50 a head, plus bonuses for families with strong young men. This wasn't law enforcement. It was human trafficking. The sound of vehicles approaching outside made everyone freeze. Multiple engines, moving fast, with the distinctive rumble of police cars. Hartwell's face went white. "I called them before I came out here," a familiar voice said from the doorway. Mercy Whitfield stepped into the cabin with her phone in her hand, its screen showing an active recording. "I've been broadcasting this entire conversation live to the county sheriff, the state police, and the FBI. Hartwell spun toward her, his gun wavering between targets. "You have no authority here. This is private property." "Actually, it's a crime scene now," Mercy replied calmly. "And thanks to your confession and these documents, it's evidence in a federal investigation into historical human trafficking and murder." The first police cars were pulling up outside, their red and blue lights casting eerie shadows through the cabin windows. Hartwell's men immediately dropped their weapons and raised their hands, clearly wanting no part of what was about to unfold. "The FBI has been investigating historical injustices against Native American families for years," Mercy continued. "They just needed evidence. Real proof. You just handed it to them." Hartwell's gun hand dropped to his side as the weight of his situation became clear. Decades of carefully maintained secrets had crumbled in a single night, brought down by the courage of a dead man who had refused to let evil win. As federal agents flooded into the cabin and placed Hartwell under arrest, Colt found himself thinking about his grandfather's final words on the tape. Silas had said it was time, and he'd been right. Some secrets were too heavy for one man to carry alone. 6 months later, Colt stood in the same spot where the cabin had been, now marked by a historical memorial honoring the families who had suffered and died here. The Hartwell family's assets had been seized, and Tom Hartwell was serving a life sentence. Mercy approached from behind, carrying flowers to place at the memorial. "Your grandfather would be proud," she said quietly. Colt nodded, feeling the weight of inherited guilt finally lifting from his shoulders. The truth had finally been set free. If you enjoyed this Western tale of family secrets and historical justice, click the video on your screen now to discover another gripping story where courage meets destiny in the American frontier. Don't forget to subscribe and consider leaving a super chat to help us bring you more compelling stories. Your support keeps these tales alive.